We are very delighted to have you here on a special day, 12-12-12. I was sending to my staff 12-12-12 in binary. For those of you who don't know, I actually got very interested in mathematics. Oh, I'm Linda Rosen, by the way. I'm sorry, forgot to say that. Because when I was in 7th grade, I was in a pilot new math program. I'm showing my age. And on the very first day of 7th grade, she started teaching us the binary system, which helped me understand base 10 in a way I never understood before. And I said, this is incredible. This is the most exciting thing I've ever done. And that may still be true. In any case, we're very pleased to invite you to our December Salon. We apologize for our November Salon, which was canceled due to Hurricane Sandy. And it's been a little while since we've been together because in September, we released our vital signs. But we're very pleased today to be talking about the C in STEM. I don't know how to pronounce that, but somewhere, not a silent C, we hope, there is a C in STEM. And we want to make the critical connection between computer science education and jobs. So we're very excited to have an expert lineup this morning that will talk about how computer science is fueling our future. In the research report we published earlier this year, we found that the high demand for occupations in computer science persisted throughout the economic downturn. That's our STEM Help Wanted report. At a time when there were almost 4 unemployed people for every job opening, the odds were very different for people with expertise in computer science. For example, every unemployed computer programmer over the past 3 years, there were about 1.5 job openings. Computer network and systems administrators fared even better odds over the same period. For every unemployed qualified person in that field, there were more than 4 job postings. So our expert panel today will delve deeper into the demand for a workforce skilled in computer science and ask why, amidst so much opportunity, computer science continues to face challenges in K-12 STEM education space. They'll talk about some much-needed policy reforms and how job demand requires a workforce skilled in computer science. So let me introduce the panel. First, let me introduce Trevor Packer, the Vice President of the Advanced Placement Program at the College Board. Trevor has led the worldwide Advanced Placement Program since 2003 and has focused on transforming the program to support the 21st century teaching and learning that all of us care so deeply about. Under his leadership, participation in the AP course has more than doubled since 2003. Earlier, Trevor served as the program's Director of Operations and supported efforts to increase the availability of AP in overseas schools. Prior to joining the College Board, Packer taught and wrote about literature at universities such as the City University of New York and at Brigham Young University. Alison Derbenwick Miller, Vice President of Oral Academy and Vice Chair of Computer Science Week, in which we are currently existing. Alison leads an international team that supports adoption of the Oracle Academy Computer Science curriculum worldwide. The team helps educators deliver computer science education through technology, curriculum, professional development, and financial support. Previously, Alison was responsible for strategic partnerships and business development for the Oracle Education Foundation. She was also Vice President of Business Operations, Worldwide Alliances, and Channels at Oracle, where she led the worldwide development and implementation of partner business practices, processes, and policies. And before joining Oracle, there was a before apparently, Alison led cross-functional teams that develop and deliver pricing, licensing, marketing, due diligence, and solutions for large and small companies. Last but not least, Dr. Chris Stephenson, Executive Director of the Computer Science Teachers Association. She is the founding Executive Director of this membership organization with 13,000 educators dedicated to improving K-12 computing education. She's also the chair of the annual Computer Science and Information Technology Conference, serves on the leadership team of the National Center for Women in Information Technology, and is the Computer Science Curriculum Advisor for Learning and Teaching with Technology magazine. Dr. Stephenson has published widely in computer science education and was most recently a primary author of CSTA K-12 Computer Science Standards. And Chris will kick things off for us this morning. Well, that's what it says here, but that's what it says here, but I think, in fact, I'm supposed to say Trevor will kick things off this morning. Thank you.
Well, I really admire Chris's fortitude in breaking in this microphone for us, and it seems to act up in particular when you use a sibilant S sound. So I've been racking my brain trying to figure out how to avoid references to STEM or science, and this panel to no avail. I'm the oldest of 9 children. I never understood that phrase that you only have a favorite child when that child has specific needs. Never understood that phrase, and as the oldest, I would look vigilantly at the way my mother sort of divided up familial resources among us. She would keep a ledger at holiday season to make sure she was spending to the dime the same amount on each child for their Christmas gifts. So she was very equitable, but if there was a favorite, it was my 4th brother, Spencer, who had a temper. And so he had special needs in the family. He had some learning disabilities. He had a temper. One night on family night, we were playing a game as a family, and he became angry about something, and so he uttered a not fit for print word of profanity the first time that had happened in the Packer household. And my father grabbed him and hauled him out of the room to give him a little talking to. My younger sister started crying and asked my mother if he was still going to go to heaven. And that was the sort of family I grew up in. But I've never understood that notion of why would someone care about someone with special needs over someone else, until I've been in this role overseeing the AP program, where we have 34 different exams, and there are great inequities in participation in these exams depending on the discipline. And let me share with you one of those. AP Calculus has 10 times the number of student participants as AP Computer Science. So when the College Board thinks about where to put our resources and how to care for what is in our stewardship, we care disproportionately at this point in our history for the growth of AP Computer Science. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about why we feel that way in this era of the Common Core. First of all, there's a study from 2011 that looked at every AP subject and followed students who participated in AP subjects into their college majors and college careers. And so in every AP discipline, you see some connection between participating in, say, art history and a higher likelihood of then majoring in art history. There are those connections, and we would say that much of that is due to self-selection. The sort of student that takes art history in high school would probably be more likely is the sort of person who's interested in that topic. And so we certainly see that across a range of disciplines. There is no discipline in which we see a stronger relationship between high school experience and selection of the college major than computer science. Here are the data from that study. If a student does not take AP Computer Science in high school, 2% of them will major in computer or information sciences. If you take AP Computer Science and score a 1, the lowest score, 8% of you will major. And if you take AP Computer Science and score a 5, 27% of those students are choosing to major. Again, much of that is self-selection. The sort of student that pursues computer science in high school has an interest there. But these relationships are much stronger than for any other discipline. And we would guess that self-selection is true, say, of music theory. The sort of student that would pursue AP music theory of all subjects in high school is the sort that would be likely to major in music theory, but the relationship is nowhere nearly as strong. There is something about exposing students to this sort of discipline in high school, which is frequently an elective, that is not rewarded in graduation requirements in the state, that does produce a powerful desire to then pursue these sorts of majors and careers. This study went through logistical regressions, too, to try to match students and to factor out other contributors to the desire to major in computer science, and still found that AP Computer Science students, regardless of of their grade on the exam were 4.5 times more likely to major than the matched peers in that logistical regression. Even if the students do not choose to major in computer science, they take more courses in computer science than their peers. 58% of AP computer science students will take additional computer science coursework in college, and they take an average of 3.7 computer science courses, as compared to their peers. 28% take a computer science course in college, and on average they take 1 course. So there's something about that that we would like to expand. If 300,000 students are taking AP Calculus, but only 23,000 are taking computer science, we see an inequity there. We would want there to be equal opportunity and equal enrollment in AP disciplines. Part of this has been driven by what the advocates of the Common Core call a rush to AP Calculus. The Common Core, one of the sort of concerns that the architects of the math standards in the Common Core have is that there is currently a rush through high school mathematics coursework to get as many students to calculus as possible in the 12th grade. Certainly the College Board does advocate for rigorous math sequencing that can culminate in a calculus course for many students. But the most frequent score in AP Calculus today is a 1. That is the mode. About 30% of students who take AP Calculus get a 1. There is strong evidence that students are being rushed to calculus. And we question at the College Board, is there a need for that sort of disproportionate math enrollments in AP, where 30,000 students are taking AP Calculus, 150,000 are taking AP Statistics, and just 23,000 are taking Computer Science? Might AP Computer Science or AP Statistics be an equally valid and appropriate pathway for students that doesn't involve this rush to calculus? So here's the Common Core math sequence, and the Common Core math sequence is not an ideal sequence for AP Calculus. The sequence was designed quite deliberately to slow down math instruction so that more students develop a solid understanding of the fundamentals. The Common Core asks teachers to do fewer things much better than they currently do, and to ensure that all students have a more solid foundation in Algebra 1. So you can see many schools can improve upon this sequence and prepare students for AP Calculus, and that's fine. But the College Board does see an opportunity here for repositioning AP Computer Science as a culminating experience as an outgrowth of the Common Core, because the prerequisite for AP Computer Science is 9th grade Algebra 1. So you do not need to rush students through the Common Core math sequence in order to prepare them successfully for an AP Mathematics course if we treat AP Computer Science in the same way that we treat AP Statistics and AP Calculus, as a natural culmination of a rigorous sequence of secondary school mathematics studies. The College Board has also been concerned that the current AP Computer Science course, with its focus on programming, and at this point in time, Java programming, is forbidding to students that may not have an initial desire to focus their computing careers on programming careers. So while programming is an essential component of computer science, the current AP course focuses exclusively on that element of computer science. So we've been urged by the National Science Foundation and by many experts in the field to think about a new AP Computer Science course, one that is much more expansive in terms of the array of applications and hands-on engaging computer science principles, hence the name, than a course that is currently solely focused on programming. Notionally, this course would sit in the year prior to AP Computer Science programming, so that students that did have a passion for programming could proceed from taking this new AP course in the array of computer science principles onto an AP computer science course in programming in the year thereafter. So we've been very heartened by university enthusiasm for this new course. The bind that we're always in with AP is we can't create a new AP course if colleges aren't willing to give placement and credit for it. That's the sort of relationship that our brand is based upon. That to call something advanced placement, if students are not getting advanced placement, doesn't really make sense, and our trustees would never approve that. So the first test in determining whether or not we would ever offer a new AP course is to check with colleges and universities to see if they would be willing or are offering a parallel course, and if they would be willing to provide credit and placement for such a course. So when we went out to many of the top institutions in the country, because they would serve as bellwethers and as influencers of others, and asked them to review the course, 5 of them piloted the course in in 2010, 2011. In the following year, 10 of them partner with 10 high schools to do further pilots of the course. And we see tremendous results from them. Of the 103 institutions that have responded to our request to review the course, 90 of them indicate that they believe the course is college level. 89 will award credit, 65 will award placement, 58 will award both credit and placement, 67 will offer a comparable course, and 71 will offer a comparable course and award credit. So really good indications that higher education will value an additional AP course in computer science that we think can better provide a pathway to the college major than this sole programming course that we currently offer. Here are examples of some of the universities that participated: Carnegie Mellon, Georgia Tech, Cornell, Princeton, Rice, Stanford, UC Berkeley, Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, and so on. And they talk about different ways that this course will fulfill their requirements. Some of them say it would fulfill minor requirements in computer science. Some of them say it would fulfill major requirements. And some of them say that it will fulfill university-wide requirements for graduation. We can't really develop a new computer science exam and have it be paper and pencil, right? So most AP exams in this era are paper and pencil exams, with the exception of Chinese and Japanese and Studio Art, which is a digital portfolio. So leveraging much of what we've learned in this AP Studio Art digital portfolio assessment, we are piloting a portfolio assessment for the new AP Computer Science, which would enable students and their teachers to build a portfolio of computer science projects over time, submit that portfolio for evaluation alongside a computer-based multiple choice and open-ended response exam that is similar to a traditional AP exam in its format. Although it will be digital, of course, instead of paper and pencil. So because there are a number of new elements and new capabilities that we will be supplying through this new AP Computer Science exam, the timeline is not as fast as we would want it to be. We are seeking funding and partnership through the National Science Foundation. The College Board is committed to matching the National Science Foundation's contribution, so that we can share the costs of this endeavor. And the aspiration is to have this course in play for fall 2016. Some of the architects of this course are here in the room. And many of you know them: Jan Cuny, Program Officer at National Science Foundation, and Owen Astrachan, Professor of Computer Science at Duke, is the principal investigator for this project. So I will pause at this point and respond to questions later. Thanks so much for being here.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here, especially during Computer Science Education Week, or as we like to call it, Christmas for us nerds. I'm really happy to talk to you today about the K-12 perspective on what's happening with computer science education, or perhaps more accurately, what's not happening, and to have the opportunity to really make solid for you what we see as the critical connection between computer science education in K-12 and the current job situation, but more particularly between how we are educating children and what we're really preparing them for, or what we're not preparing them for. I'll just give you a little bit of context about CSTA. We are an international organization of, well, every time I give a presentation, I have to change it. We're now creeping up to 14,000 members. We're growing, just exploding in terms of our membership. We have 42 regional chapters in the US and Canada. We develop and publish the de facto national standards for computer science education in K-12. We provide professional development for teachers. We conduct and publish original research about what's happening in computer science education, and we provide classroom resources and promotional materials to support computer science education. I think that it's important to kind of set the context by giving my early observations about some really critical skills issues. One of the things that's problematic is that there's an assumption that if computers are in schools, that students are learning the skills that they need to learn. And I can tell you that that's fundamentally not true. What we are focusing on, unfortunately, the T in STEM at the implementation level of schools is really interpreted as using technology to support learning across the curriculum. So what we're doing is we're teaching students to be consumers of technology rather than creators of technology. And what we know from our history is that the nations that build the tools that the rest of the world use control the power, both economic and socially. So we are already putting our students behind the 8 ball in terms of the original perceptions of what the T in STEM means. We've also become increasingly focused on measuring what students learn. And that's a very, very important thing. But if they're not learning the right things in the first place, all of our measuring will come to naught. It will not achieve our goals in terms of making students ready for the opportunities that are out there. And last year, author Douglas Rushkoff wrote a very provocative book called Program or Be Programmed. And what he focused on was that the world is becoming so imbued with technology that those who are capable of creating and manipulating that technology become the power holders in society. And those who are not become subject to those who are. And I think one of the ways to think about this is in the early days of computers being omnipresent in banking, if you would go into your teller and something would be wrong with your account, they would immediately tell you that it was a computer error. And if you don't know what kinds of mistakes computers make and what kinds they don't, then you were probably most likely to believe that, when actually it was human error. So in a world where all of our interrelations are becoming so imbued with technology, there is a certain requirement for a fundamental knowledge that all students need in order to function effectively in that world, and that many students need in order to thrive in that world. So when we look at kind of what directions we're sending our students in STEM, one of the things that becomes immediately apparent is that computer science and mathematics are one of the few fields in which our ability to produce graduates for the jobs that exist is greatly being outstripped by the number of jobs that are currently available and jobs that are being created. And I know that this is true in real people terms, because I've spoken to folks in Microsoft up at Redmond who say, we have 3,000 jobs right now we cannot fill. And I live in Oregon, not too far from Redmond, and when I see how high our unemployment rate is, and then I look at the few number of students who are actually on the pathway to these jobs, I find it deeply concerning. So the jobs are there, but we are not getting enough students into the pipeline with the sufficient skills to fill those jobs. I think that this will become even more the case in the future. If we look at our economy and what is coming down the road, what we really see is that most of the jobs in which there are productive job increases between 2010 and 2020, almost all of them are computing based in some fashion. And one thing that it's really important to be clear about is these are not kind of the Mac jobs of computing, and by Mac I don't mean Mac technology, but they're not the low-skilled data processing jobs. These are the high-level, high-skilled computer science jobs. So I think that what we see here, to some extent, is a recipe for not just educational disaster, but for social disaster as well. That we have all of the opportunities in one segment, and we're funneling all our kids somewhere else. So that when they get out and begin to search for jobs, they don't have the skills in order to fill the jobs that are available. And I think Trevor did a wonderful job talking about the differentiations between different disciplines when it comes to the advanced placement exams. And you can see the calculus with this huge exploding line moving up and ever upward towards heaven. And computer science as the sad yellow line crawling along the bottom, not as close to heaven as calculus is. And so the situation we have here is that it's an issue of pathways. It's an issue of who's on them. And our kids are not on those pathways. And it's not that calculus or mathematics isn't important or the sciences aren't important. But the other thing that's not reflected here is that we are in a world now where the good things are being driven, the solutions to the problems are in the area of what I call the combinatorial sciences, or computer science and biology, computer science and mathematics, computer science and mechanical engineering. And in order to find those problems that are so pressing, we really need a true marriage of people who have skills that are flexible enough in both areas. Or we need teams that consist of people with the context and content knowledge of both those disciplines to find a new way to create skills and to solve problems that exist that up until now we haven't been able to solve. The other issue that's really, really pressing is that it's not just that we don't have enough students in the pathway. It's that there are a whole lot of students who are just not there. And when we look at the representation of underrepresented minority students and women in computer science, we are a discipline in crisis in terms of not being broadly representative. And when you think about the impact on business and industry and everything we know about the importance of having teams who develop new innovations that are integrated and representative of the populations we're serving, to see that there are not African American students and that there are not Latino students and that a lot of the women are just missing is a critical, critical issue, because we won't bring the creativity and the cultural knowledge to these problems to solve them in a way that is most effective. And the other issue we face too is one of standards. And we conducted with ACM a study that we published in a report called Running on Empty. And what we did was we looked at where the computer science learning standards set forth by CSTA were actually being taught within this or embedded in state standards. And we were very liberal in terms of looking at every single field. So we looked in the tech standards, we looked in the science standards, we looked in the math standards. And what we saw is that the standards are largely absent. And what's really unfortunate about this is even in the states that look really good, Oregon being an example, the standards are on the books. They're just not being taught in the classrooms. And there's fewer and fewer computer science classrooms in the state of Oregon, even though the standards are on the books. So this issue of making sure that the students are learning the knowledge that they need to learn, and that knowledge is somehow embedded in the standards is a critical issue. And I think that the other truly pressing problem we have, and this is both a conceptual problem and a policy problem, is that because computer science is not in the core, however you define the core, it's creating enormous difficulties at the school level. There's a little adventure that I went on that I call Welcome to Duct Tape City. And basically what's happening is that the computer science classes get all the leftover broken hardware that no one else in the school wants to use. And what's happening is they're, duct taping things together and trying to keep their classrooms working because they're so under-resourced, because computer science is not in the core, because the STEM funding that's trickling down is not trickling into computer science. So the kids that have the opportunity to really push this medium in terms of what they can do with it have the worst equipment in the schools, largely. They're also receiving really bad advice from counselors where students who are really bright and really engaged, or particularly young women or underrepresented minority students, are being counseled away from computer science, especially if they're really smart kids and they have a chance to really excel, because it's not a required course. It won't get them anything. We also see what can only be described as insane policy decisions that arise out of this as well. One of the reasons that I changed my presentation this morning was because we had new craziness. So we have a situation right now in Ohio where all of the teachers have been told that they must have a standardized assessment for all courses that they teach, so a pre and post test, and that they must have it by the end of this school year with no funding and no organization and no idea of who's going to write those tests. Now, there's a very strong lobby in Ohio in the agriculture industry. So the Aggie universities stepped up and said, we'll fund the writing of the assessments for agricultural courses. But there's not such a thing in computer science. And so right now, there are groups of teachers, mostly being channeled by the CSTA local chapter, to gather teachers to write their own assessments so that they can teach their courses next year. And if they fail to do so, there will not be a single computer science course taught in the state of Ohio next year. Standards in Georgia. Every time the standards are set and grounded in an idea of learning that seems to make sense, and they go along for a couple of years, and then somebody in the policy office decides that it's time to completely rewrite the standards again. And so what's happening is we're getting people just exhausted with writing constant updates of the standards and trying to fight to keep those standards actually grounded in what students need to learn. And there is nothing more crazy making than the teacher certification in every state. We're conducting a major survey right now trying to determine what the requirements are for teachers to teach in every state across the country, for teachers to teach computer science. And the worst part of it and most frustrating part of it is the folks responsible for overseeing the policy have no idea what their own requirements are in their own states. And in some states where the policies are set for teacher certification at the district level, they're getting no talent coming in because every district has its own set of certification requirements for computer science. And sometimes they're so rigorous they can't find anyone. And sometimes they're so useless that the home ec teacher is being told, you're teaching AP computer science next year because we need to put a body in place. And there are no certification requirements. And when you think about it, that's not the kind of quality control that's conducive to ensuring that we have a good teacher in front of a classroom really engaging students. So the little absence from the core becomes a huge abscess when we look at how it impacts computer science at the school level. The other issue, when we look at why underrepresented students are not taking the AP exam, chances are because they don't have an opportunity. Because what we see is where the AP exam for computer science exists are in wealthy white schools. That's just the bottom line. That's blunt, but that's how it is. And it's got nothing to do with whether the students are interested in taking it or able to really do well in it. It's just they're not provided the opportunity. And the other issue is that because, as I mentioned, computer science counts for graduation in only 9 states, in the other states, our best and brightest students can't take it. There's just no room in their schedule to take a course that doesn't count for anything. These kids are on a track. They know what they need. They haven't got time to take something that they don't need. So we really have a national imperative here as we see it. We truly believe at CSTA that the future of science, of innovation, of solutions is truly grounded in computing. And I can tell you, because I have the opportunity to travel all over the world and talk about computer science education, that there are other nations who know that, and they are coming for us. They are building new curriculum. They are making computer science mandatory for all students. They understand that this is the future for them and for their kids. The UK just completely got rid of their, what they called ICT, which is kind of a low-level applications curriculum, and are struggling to move as quickly as possible to get computer science in every school and to train teachers to teach that course. And so what we see again is that issue of educating students for the jobs that are out there and what kind of national priority that is. And also, I would say, what kind of global priority that is in terms of the US position within the international economy. And failing to do so is really not just a recipe for economic disaster, but for social disaster. Because when you see generations of people who are trained but not trained for the jobs that are out there, what you see is the disintegration of communities, of families. I come from an auto town. I'm the only person in 5 generations of my family who didn't work for General Motors. And I can tell you that when the auto industry tanked, the impact was horrific, horrific. And so I'm really, really passionate about making sure that future generations of kids don't come out of schools with skills for jobs that no longer exist. So in terms of the economic and social disaster, I think there's also really key policy issues that impact the nation and put us at peril. When we don't have the people we need to protect our own cyber infrastructure, that's a big problem. When we have critical skills and employability gaps, huge problem. Jobs we can't fill, where we have to go offshore to get people who are being trained in countries who are providing the training, that's a big problem. But more than that, it's the dreams we'll never dream. It's the tools we'll never build. It's the solutions that we'll never have to problems that we currently can't solve. It's all tied up in the extent to which we agree or don't agree to support computer science education and to make these opportunities available for every student. And I was really, really delighted when I first spoke to the Change the Equation folks that that they were willing to consider helping us get the message out about how critical the computer science issues are right now and the important role of the silent C within STEM. Because we really need to make some changes. It's just the bottom line, and the time is now. We have to. And we can't do that without the commitment and passion and insight of business leaders who are really going to get on board. I'm so glad that Alison is here. She has become a remarkable partner in terms of trying to help us solve this computer science education issue. And what I see is that the mantle of responsibility is always falling on the same companies. And we can't keep doing that. We really need everybody on board, because it isn't just the high-tech industries that are benefiting from computer science education and from the skills we're building. It's every single industry. It's banking and insurance and automotive and everything else. And we need some help. We critically need some help. So what we're asking and what we're hoping you'll help us with is really champion real computer science in schools, not drag and drop, not keyboarding, real computer science. That you'll help us prepare teachers and students to learn, that you'll help us address the critical issues of inclusion in the core. This is killing us. It's absolutely killing us. That you'll help us get the message out that these skills are important, that this topic is critical to our future, and that you'll help work with us for policy change. Thank you very much.
So I don't have slides for you today, so I'm just going to talk and hopefully not get too much feedback from this microphone. I apologize for that. I'm very tempted to stand up here and just say, yeah, what Chris said, because I think she is spot on, and I think a lot of what she says reflects very much what those of us in industry are seeing as major issues in both our workforce and in our schools today. I want to talk about some numbers. I know you've heard a lot of numbers today, but here's some more for you. 1.5 million. That's the number of data-savvy managers and business analysts that McKinsey is predicting we are going to need in this country by 2018 and not have. 1.5 million. 120,000. That's the number of computing jobs requiring at least a bachelor's degree that we have produced in this country every year since 2010 and are predicting we will continue to produce every year until at least the end of the decade. 3.4%. That is the current unemployment rate for computing jobs in the United States. 40,000 is the number of computer science bachelor's degrees that we produce in the United States every year. 21,139. That's the number of students who took AP computer science exam in 2011. So compare what we need, 120,000 jobs out there, to what we're producing, 40,000 bachelor's degrees in computer science, and the numbers speak for themselves. We are not, in this country, educating and graduating enough students in computer science. We haven't in the past, we're not doing it now, and we're not going to do it in the foreseeable future. And this is a major problem. It is a problem that we collectively need to care an awful lot about and start doing something about right now. Computer science, as Chris said, is vitally important for 3 reasons. It underpins the modern global economy. It is critical to the future success of our children, and it is essential to the global competitiveness and the security of the United States. So I'm going to talk briefly about those 3 ideas and then make some recommendations. First, computer science underpins the global economy. I almost feel silly saying this. Look around, you guys all know this. STEM jobs today are the majority of the jobs out there, and they're the majority of the well-paying jobs, and most of the STEM jobs require some knowledge of computing. In fact, between now and 2018, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is predicting that 71% of the STEM jobs out there are going to be in computing and require computing knowledge. So I was trained as a historian, and I tend to look at things as an historian still, even though I work at a tech company. And I really believe that we are in the midst right now of a shift in human history that is as significant as the change we saw at the end of the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. 19th century, our economy shifted from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy. The way we lived, Where we lived, the way we worked, the way we interacted with society, where we earned our money moved. The education system changed along with that. Fast forward 120 years, we're now in the midst of the information revolution. We are shifting from an industrial economy to an information economy. And the jobs are shifting. The way we live, the way we engage in society, the way we earn our money is changing. The problem is the school systems are not keeping up. At a time when we need computer science graduates more than ever, we are teaching less computer science. Chris gave you some numbers. Her organization did a study that showed in 2009 we were teaching 8% fewer computer science courses than we were 2 years earlier. Between 1989 and 2009, the number of students studying computer science in the United States dropped from 26% to 19%. We are not preparing our children to go where the jobs are. This is a major issue from a global competitiveness perspective and from an economic perspective and from a security perspective. Every industry today, every industry relies on computing knowledge. I can say this, Oracle is number one. Our software is in 44 industries. Number one, we're in more industries than that. Computing is everywhere. Everyone in this room relies on computer scientists to make your life more convenient, more comfortable, more secure. You have your paycheck deposited by direct deposit. That's software. You ride on a train system where the trains are managed by software. You use your phone to check email. You're relying on software. Computing is central. Go to the doctor's office. Who are you trusting to keep your medical records safe, to make sure that you're not getting conflicting information about what medicines you should be taking? Software. We all rely on computing. Now, a qualified workforce is obviously the lifeblood for any company. It's the lifeblood for Oracle. Like Microsoft, we have thousands of jobs posted right now that we can't fill because we can't get qualified workers in this country. Just to give you some sense of scope, in 2012, we, Oracle, have averaged 10 new hires every day in 2012 in the United States. We hired in the first 9 months of this year 5,600 people. Almost all of those jobs required some computing knowledge. When we make a purely technical hire, 98% of those hires come directly from school or from another job. There is virtually no unemployment in computing jobs today. The labor supply is so thin that at a time when everybody is clamoring for a job in other areas, it takes us 123 days to find and hire somebody into a technical job. And as Chris said, it's not just the tech industry that's suffering from this. In fact, 67% of computing jobs are outside of the tech industry. 36% are in professional and business services, 12% are in manufacturing, 12% are in financial services, and 7% are in government and public education. When you look at those numbers, it's obvious that if our children are going to be successful in the future, they need computing knowledge. And maybe you're not a parent now, so maybe this isn't immediately your concern, but your neighbors have children, people you work for have children. The children are going to make us successful and make sure that we all have enough to eat and things to do when we all retire. So it is imperative that we make sure that the children in our country are prepared. The way we do this is we ensure that there is broad access to a rigorous and continuous computer science curriculum in our public education system. You may not be aware that 90% of the children in this country rely on our public education system for their education and their futures. We can't afford as a nation to let their success and their needs become a political football and not fund and ensure that computer science is part of the core so that we are getting good teachers who are well-resourced to teach them these subjects. I think one of the major challenges that we all encounter, and I feel especially when I come to Washington, is that investing in education is a long-term commitment. And we are so focused on what's the immediate ROI and what's going to happen in 6 months that sometimes we overlook the importance of making these long-term investments. If we start students in computer science in 4th grade today, they will not hit the job market and make a difference in our economy until 2025. That, in Washington terms and anybody's terms, feels very far away. We won't see that return for a long time, but what we can see today is the cost of not making that investment 20 years ago. We cannot hire people today in computer science because in 1990, we were not investing in educating these students. We can't afford to make that mistake. Looking ahead, I would like the US to remain globally competitive, personally. And when you look around at who are the world leaders, it is the countries that produce the creative problem solvers and the innovators and the critical thinkers. All those skills are skills that are learned in computer science. So when you teach computer science as part of the core and you get your students learning this, you're kind of getting a bunch of benefits for one cost, right? Because you're teaching your students not only the computing skills they need, you're teaching them all these other 21st century skills that will make them successful and world leaders. And the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that the US is falling behind. The US is near the bottom of the 29 developed countries that produce STEM graduates. Only 15 to 17% of our bachelor's degrees are in STEM fields today. If you look at 2008, only 4% of our bachelor's degrees were in engineering. 4%. That same year, China produced 31% of their bachelor's degrees in engineering. Of the 34 OECD countries, the US is 17th in math and 17th in science. That's not leading the pack. That's being lost somewhere in the middle. And I don't think that's where any of us want to be. And as Chris said, only 9 of our states count computer science toward core graduation requirements. This most critical of fields for our future success, and only 9 states are giving students credit for going there? That's not good enough. It is not good enough. So what do we do about this? What would our recommendations be? We need to strengthen K-12 education by providing additional resources to recruit and retain STEM teachers. And that needs to focus especially on computer science. We need to implement the Common Core standards and the next generation science standards, and we need to make sure that those standards specifically include computer science. We need to rationalize teacher professional development and credentialing policies, and that includes recognizing K-12 teaching as a highly esteemed, professional, and well-compensated field, because we need our students to be learning computer science from the most knowledgeable, the most qualified, and the most passionate teachers, and that will not happen if a student who graduates in computer science can go into the tech industry and make $180,000 a year or go teach for $32,000. We need to broaden access to computer science in high school by establishing federal laws that put computer science on equal footing with other academic subjects. And finally, we need to incentivize and fund strategies that increase capacity for STEM degrees in higher education and help students finish the degrees they start in computer science and engineering. Look at the numbers. Think about those numbers again. 120,000 jobs we can't fill. 40,000 graduates. It's not good enough. We have to do better. Thank you.
Well, many thanks to our panel. Let me make 2 observations before I open it up for questions. One is that yesterday, in some ways, encapsulates the challenge that computer science had, because once again, we got Tim's results. Some of us woke up thinking, I've had this day before. That I'm doing today.
It is your personality.
It is, apparently. So I apologize for that. Can you hear me? I'll use my teacher voice if I need to turn this off. But really getting at the question of the pervasiveness of computing, I dug out from my old files something from the Second International Math Study. This was before we even let science into the international comparisons in the 1980s. I brought it in to share with staff. Of course, the story is the same, even though we've made progress. But what was the format? I brought in a series of slides No PowerPoint, it was just a series of slides. So we had to physically put that in everyone's hands who was going to give that talk. And that's the environment in which we find ourselves. The other thing I'd like to mention quickly is, as many of you know, right before Thanksgiving, the companies in Change the Equation proudly released ION Future, IONfuture.org, which is a game-based learning environment targeting middle school and early high school kids to explore different careers. And if you look at the moment, there are 100 careers profiled, and that's mostly because that's how much money we had to spend to get 100 careers, not that that's the limit of the number. And I would urge you, or particularly those of you who have contact with kids in those age brackets, to encourage them to look at it, because there's some very exciting games and very exciting information. And with that, let me open it to the audience for questions. Just a reminder to please take the mic, identify yourself, address the question to an individual if appropriate, and please try to keep it concise, and they will keep their answers concise as well.
So not just with counselors, we feel that we need to make a push from our side to school and district administrators and to state policymakers. So let me talk to you about a few things that are on our minds that we're exploring. One of them is that will be a little bit controversial, but we think we may have appetite to push this through, will be to, when we implement we're piloting right now something called an AP capstone, which is a bundle of 5 AP courses that would be recognized in various ways by higher education institutions. Something we're considering is requiring that in order for us to grant that capstone to students in a system, AP Computer Science would be required. So that would be something we could do that would be a very strong statement that we agree with the concerns that have been shared so powerfully today, and that we agree with them so much that in order for us as a college board to recognize a student for having taken a breadth of disciplines, computer science must be one of them. If we were to do that, we would seek the support of higher education institutions in recognizing that diploma in admissions processes in key ways. So from that perspective, those are the sort of messages we feel that counselors need to be hearing, not just from the College Board, but from higher education institutions and from state policymakers in order to redirect students on this pathway. On the counselor level, we do provide professional development for counselors, and as part of our rollout, we have a new president of the College Board, David Coleman, one of the architects of the Common Core, and so he's committed the College Board very publicly to supporting the implementation of the Common Core. And as part of that, we will be providing very clear messaging to schools about the relationship of AP courses to the Common Core. And we plan to have a fairly aggressive communications campaign about the appropriateness of AP Computer Science as a capstone experience for Common Core math sequences.
Policy. That there was a sense that that the Common Core was going to focus on certain subject areas, and computer science was not one of them. We've had a great number of conversations with the folks from the Common Core, and while they are sympathetic with our concerns, I think I have to be really blunt and say that the message that I'm perceiving is that if we open it up for computer science, we'll have to open it up for everyone, and it will be a blood on the floor battle. We've got what we've got, and we're not going to change it. And that's the only thing I can see as the primary impediment. It seems to be a fear that if one more subject is added to the Common Core, that it'll just open the battle for everyone else who is also not included. When we hear this, we have, well, a small amount of sympathy. But when we ground this in the conversations that we've been having today about the connection to jobs, we become really frustrated with it. I think that's the only thing that we can say, that we understand the political implications of who is in and who is out. But when we look at the fiscal, economic, and social implications of leaving computer science out, we feel that that's an inadequate answer.
My name is Anthony Priest. I'm with DC Public Schools, and my #1 priority is adding computer science into the DC curriculum.
Yay!
So we added a course this year at 2 schools. We're adding cybersecurity in the fall. And Chris, I'll ask you this, but I'll rather follow up afterwards because it's for everyone. We're going to be adding middle school computer science next fall, and I could use help in defining the curriculum so that it'll survive and be able to be replicated in other DC schools. If you've got any ideas, I'd really like to talk to you.
As the kids say, call me. Or text me.
Scott Groginski from Congressman Jared Polis' office of Colorado, and just want to make sure you're all aware of my boss's bill, the Computer Science Education Act, which is HR 3014. And we have 9 co-sponsors. It's going to change numbers next year when he reintroduces it, but it's the only bill in Congress right now that would really enhance computer science education nationwide. It would provide funding support to states to partner with higher education and local school districts to increase coherent standards and assessments and curriculum and professional development for educators. So I encourage all of you to get involved and help support the legislation as we move forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Mason with the National Association, of Elementary School Principals, and kind of a two-part comment question. My grandson is designing educational computer games. You know, he does that on his own, but if I look at the elementary school and what support is he getting, you know, not much, okay? So what should we be doing at the elementary level? And then think about ISTE and the standards that ISTE has come up with. How does that relate to the standards you're talking about?
First of all, I think that what you're talking about is so critical in terms of the kids who have interest and aptitude, and not every grandchild is going to have the support to pursue that interest and to really develop the skills that they're not learning in schools. And so one of the things that's most interesting is one of the fastest growing segments of our CSTA membership is elementary and middle school teachers. They understand this need for their students, and they're trying to figure out. The CSTA standards actually contain learning standards from kindergarten right through till the end of K-12. And if you look at the ISTE standards and the CSTA standards, there is, for the early grades, there is some overlap in terms of the basic technology skills that students need as they go along. The primary difference, I think, between the two sets of standards and where they diverge is that from the beginning, the computer science CSTA standards really start building in what I call the building blocks of computational thinking that are absent from the ISTE standards. So we really take it to the level of, you know, simple things that you can do to start teaching students binary, and there are some really great resources out there. We've just published a document called Building a Solid Foundation, which really is a series of invited articles exploring what can we do in grades K through 8. And I think that the teachers are enthusiastic. If they can convince their administrators that this is important, there are great tools now that never existed, say, 15 years ago, that the kids can use. There are sets of standards that the schools can use and which they can use as a basis for assessment. The next step is really getting the administrators to support the teachers in bringing this content. When we look at how the computer science content should be integrated in K to 8, it has to be integrated into other disciplines. That just makes sense. But it's also much more exciting to do that in K to 8 because they have that interdisciplinary focus where they can say, we're going to teach a lesson that's going to include science and some computer science and some history and bring it all together. So I think there's new resources, there's curriculum, there's standards. It's just getting it into the system so that every kid can be like your grandchild and really explore that incredible enthusiasm and ability that they have.
I think I know what the origin of that is. Having been on both sides of that, where I started my career not thinking computer science was that important, starting from an academic background, and then entering industry and entirely changed. And the difference is, as an academic researcher, you have as much time in the world to solve a problem. You can run your computer program over the course of days, weeks. In industry, and I work on ocean modeling, you have to solve in real time. You cannot go there and say, hold on a second, I'll detect that submarine next week. And once you realize that, then you realize how important computer programming is. And our team is actually, as you mentioned, Chris, the future is in combinatorial physics, science, and computer science and science projects, specifically physics and mathematics. I'm a physicist, but I also do some computer programming. We have computer programmers, but they also have a physics background, and we team together. And it's important that people are familiar with both, so that as physicists we realize, okay, the ideal solution, the optimal solution, is not necessarily a solution you want to implement if it can't be implemented in a real time on a computer. Similarly, you want to make sure that our computer programs don't propose a solution that says, well, that's great, but it violates the laws of physics. So, anyway.
Hi, my name is Peter Gutmacher, and I work with an organization that supports and develops out-of-school time programming throughout the district. And I have what may be a very stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I know in my world of community-based organizations and out-of-school time programs, sort of the bricks and mortar issue of computers themselves and network capability is an issue for delivering that kind of thing. Is that true for schools too, or is that a non-issue?
Oh, you know, it didn't used to be an issue, but all of a sudden it's come up on the radar as an enormous issue. I think it has to do with funding for technology in schools and then the realization that there was no replacement schedule built in. And what's happened is there was a whole lot of technology provided to the schools, say 10 years ago. It differs with different districts and states. But now all of that technology has reached the end of its even impractical lifespan. And so suddenly, one of the things that we ask teachers when we do our survey every 2 years is, is access to hardware and software an issue for you? Does it impede your program at all? And for years and years, we got no, 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 yes. And all of a sudden, it's become, in most cases, either the first or second concern. And it has to do with the fact that the hardware is not being replaced, and in schools where it is being replaced, it's not being replaced for the computer science courses, and that's creating that duct tape city issue where they're getting all the broken down, useless stuff from everybody else. And so it's definitely, that access issue is really clear. And there's another piece of that which isn't necessarily so intuitive, is the bandwidth access. And there's this assumption that all schools are have internet access. Well, all schools maybe. How good their bandwidth is? Is it in the computer science classroom? No, almost never. And often the thing is, well, they could get access at home. And I was at a presentation where that conversation took place, and someone said, well, they can get access at home. And the teacher said, well, actually, no, I'm in a rural district, and my kids can't get access at home. And then it was, well, they could get satellite. And she said, many of my students don't even have indoor plumbing or more than 2 sets of clothes to wear. Their family are not going to be spending money on satellite access. And so I think that it's an enormous issue, and it's complicated by the fact that the only funding accessible right now for hardware and software is the Perkins funding, which is focused on vocational education. And how it's being interpreted in most states is that if you're a rigorous academic program, you can't use Perkins funding. So, and one of the things, CSTA is working much more directly with a lot of after-school programs, what we call informal ed. And what we're really trying to do is figure out ways that we can combine the small number of resources we have and make sure that we're giving access to as many kids as we possibly can. Because in a lot of places, you're the only avenue.
And I think there's been a certain thread of our conversation of being true believers in computing and computer science. And I'm wondering how we can take the very realistic step in the landscape that we've got. So I'm not disputing any of the data. I'm in full agreement with it. But I am really trying to acknowledge that there are lots of pushes and pulls, and the folks in math are just as adamant about and roll out the same kind of statistics, and the folks in science roll out the same kind of statistics, and even history can roll out the same kind of statistics. So I'm wondering how we can take this conversation to a new level. I mean, I heard it in what you were saying the College Board was thinking about in making a new package. But I would just wonder what the panelists might have to say about that.
I'll go very quickly because I have a more limited perspective here. One of the most frequent challenges we encounter when we talk to schools about adding computer science program or computer science coursework is exactly what you've described. They feel like they don't have teachers with degrees in that area, and if they do, why would they be working for those salaries? So we have just completed a nationwide analysis of teaching backgrounds of current computer science teachers, so we can understand what sort of backgrounds, if not computer science majors, still can result through uptraining in capabilities that deliver high-quality computer science instruction. So we're eager to learn from those studies. I understand CSTA has another similar study underway, but if we can find routes to supplying schools with guidance as to what sort of capabilities to look for in their school and how we can support them in the uptraining, we're confident that we can raise the funds to pay for professional development for teachers in schools if we can identify backgrounds that administrators can draw upon to uptrain. So we're very interested in that. How can we help administrators with the challenge of finding teachers who can teach computer science who may not have a computer science degree?
I think part of the challenge that we have here is that, and I know you won't believe this, but my perspective is very prejudiced, and and I think that I think the key that we get into is that it becomes in somehow a zero-sum game. If someone wins, someone else will lose, and that's a struggle all the time. I'm an English major originally, and that's a field that I love. Alison is a history major. Somehow we got lucky enough to get to where we are and bring those skills that we learned. So I don't for a moment discount the importance of other fields and particularly other STEM fields. But somehow we have to figure out how to use the resources that we have more efficiently and more effectively. I think that one of the key challenges is that we are in a political economy where spending money on anything is not a popular idea, especially in education right now. But we are seeing with the Computer Science Education Act some really good ideas about how to do it in a way that is not a huge fiscal challenge. Perspective, Linda, but I think it's a conversation we have to keep having because it's very important.
I think too, let me just add quickly that events like Computer Science Education Week are really important because I think there is, in many cases, just a lack of awareness of the problem. The thing that I find very interesting is when I go give these presentations, it's often to largely either believers, it's computer science teachers already, or it's the same fairly small audience. And I think one of the things we need to do to have the conversation at a different level is get out there to the people who really don't know and don't see these numbers every time they go to a talk on these areas. And we need to get parents understanding how important this is, and we really need to help support this from the grassroots movement as well. I think we're doing all we can in this room, but there aren't very many of us.
Can I just add one thing? I think one of the things that CSTA is trying to do is we were very active in working with the Next Generation Science Standards folks when the first draft came out of the standards. We were really delighted to see that they had computational thinking embedded. We had some concerns about how it was defined, and we participated in the review process. And when we saw the next draft, there was a real marked improvement. So I think part of what we can do is work more collegially across disciplines to help strengthen the computer science content within other disciplines, because then more and more students will benefit.